Welcome to the Wandering Tangent podcast. I'm BJ, with me is Jeff and Gary, and today we are ostensibly talking about good Star Trek. As we talk about 1982 film The Wrath of Khan, I say ostensibly because Gary's over here throwing a wrench into things, giving The Wrath of Khan a lower score than Eight-Legged Freaks. As the person who updates our score tracker, Gary, I know it's your comfort movie, but man, you giving Eight-Legged Freaks a 4 is totally thrown off, like, everything.
So, do I have to start this podcast by defending my score now?
No, because you already defend that in the Eight-Legged Freaks review and probably podcast. You can go back and listen to that. I'm just saying.
No, but I mean like my low score of Star Trek.
Oh, I mean, if you want to, it depends on how much you want Jeff to reach through the internet and inflict bodily harm upon you.
I'm not a vindictive Star Trekian person. Like I don't go after the non-believers. I don't. I maintain my composure, even despite any kind of.
Yeah, it's in here staring at the Discord screen saying, "From hell's heart I stab at thee."
From hell's heart I stab at thee. From my last breath I spit at thee. Yeah, Eight-Legged Freaks. Hey, Gary is summoning his inner McCoy, where he's voting based on his emotions, just how he feels. Sometimes a feeling is just a feeling. Feelings have their feelings, exactly.
So
thanks for coming, everyone. How can we keep going in the face of such wisdom as sometimes feelings are just feelings?
All right. So I gave it a much lower score than you two. So I feel like I have to defend that.
Well, like not like much lower.
No, I mean we all gave it good scores.
Not exceptionally lower, but you're right, BJ. Where Eight-Legged Freaks was kind of a movie that aspires to be a B movie, whereas Star Trek Wrath of Khan is a classic that is generally beloved by just about everybody who's seen it, right? So how could I enjoy this obviously Jeff's statement, as weird as it is, holds true in that feelings are feelings, and you enjoy the movies that you enjoy, right? So I enjoyed Eight-Legged Freaks, and then I obviously enjoyed Star Trek Wrath of Khan slightly less. So I don't want to get too much onto a soapbox and just like go on and on. So feel free to interrupt me.
On my friend.
Just interrupt me anytime you want to, right?
Oh, okay.
I'll start a timer.
No. Do
you have a real rant? Because if you have a rant, you can rant. Otherwise,
I mean,
that we can talk about the reason why it is 3 and not 0. Because there's so many.
Oh,
fun things.
There's a lot of good about this movie. And then there's a lot of like things that just didn't quite make sense in the context of.
Okay, why don't you name one? I bet it's the same one I have. I will bet that.
Kirstie Allen's character. It grated me every time she showed up on. She's supposed to be a Vulcan, and yet she's very passionate. And she
doesn't really do the Vulcan personality thing very well.
She doesn't. I mean, it's really hard to go up, to stand up to Leonard Nimoy and pull things off the same way he does. And he's only supposed to be half a Vulcan, right? Vulcans are supposed to be devoid of emotion and pure, beings of pure logic, right?
Yeah.
So, and yet this...
Well, I mean, they are still mortal beings, so
yeah, they're still human.
And they do a good job.
And mostly, from what I understand, it's mostly a philosophical thing, because aren't Romulans basically the same species?
Yes. Yeah,
and yet they're so very
they're the
different.
same. Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah, so without logic, Vulcans would be a lot more like Romulans, power hungry. They'd probably be even more irrational because there's times where their logic completely gets destroyed during a 7-year period. Like there's a 7-year cycle where they go through this period of time where their emotions just come out. And they're like a beast when the emotions come out. Like worst roommate ever, kind of a beast.
Is that where they get the weird sticks and start beating each other up with them over the ladies?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, isn't that when they basically go in the heat?
Yeah, basically.
So
I think it's Pong Far is what it's called.
But anyways, so we've got this Kirstie Allen character, and it grates me that this character is there. Obviously, you had to have younger people there.
Well, they picked her because she's... Yeah.
She's young and attractive. It's very obviously the reason why they picked her at the time. And yet she's also trying to project this aloofness, and yet it's not working. And it just seems like there's this character that's tacked on in there unnecessarily. Obviously, there's, it's so that's, if I was to find the biggest nitpick, it would be that. And also,
okay. Now this is
okay.
Well, I was going to say it is somewhat early on in the Star Trek world, in the terms of filmmaking. Because we had the original series, they had an animated thing they went for, and Star Wars came out, so they're like, okay, we can do this now. The first movie was a flop. People didn't like it. It wasn't funny, and it wasn't really entertaining, even though it had all the Brainiac stuff about it. This one...
I still love the fact that Jeff calls it maybe the best movie ever made. Yeah, he freely admits it's not very entertaining.
I freely admit that it doesn't have entertaining qualities that would appeal to the common person. Definitely. I admit that because it's true. There's no point in that entire movie where people laugh. But in this movie, there's laughing points. People laugh. And as far as the girl Vulcan, I don't really see she probably isn't as cold-hearted as some other Vulcans are portrayed as. The next actress that played her in the third movie, because they couldn't get the same actress, so they had to replace her. And she's a lot more cold and to the point, and I think has a better portrayal of a Vulcan. But yeah, I guess I kind of see it, but kind of not as well. She does at times. She says humor is a hard concept. So I don't know. But do you have any other nitpicks? Anything else?
I think we proved every podcast that humor is indeed a hard concept.
So
we haven't figured it out.
So I have one.
There's another kind of a weird nitpick that kind of threw me. The costumes and the art style seemed to change.
Okay.
So there's the motion picture, the Star Trek unit, or the Federation uniforms in that one, and then there's the uniforms in this one kind of match like this one, and then the next two, and then they seem to change again in further movies. At least it feels that way, and I'm like,
well, yeah.
What's going on? Why is the costume it's supposed to be the Starfleet uniform. You should be able to like have one uniform, and it'll always, like, they had a uniform in the original series. Admittedly, it was a hokey one, but still it was a uniform. And as much as you like absolutely loathe the more modern interpretations of Star Trek, at least they had the same uniforms and were consistent throughout pretty much the entire series. So it's just kind of weird that the uniform would change over the course of a series, and it
uniforms change though. I mean, uniforms change. Like if you look at a uniform of anything today, it's going to be different 100 years ago. And okay, maybe we're talking about the difference of decades.
Yeah, it's
I
only
think
like supposed to be.
It's about
It's only
70 years between TNG and the original, about. So I would think it's rational to assume there'd be some sort of uniform change.
No, but
In
I mean, like
70
even
years.
within this series of movies, like from motion picture to these ones to the ones later, it feels like it changes a few times, and it just kind of
Twice.
seems
They go
odd.
from the yeah. So the original series had one, then the motion picture tried something very different, and they decided it was way too 70s. So they decided to have a more like British looking type of uniform that was, had kind of respect associated with it. The Roddenberry's original idea is that they would have color coded uniforms. So your specialty would be all over your uniform. So if you looked around a room, you could see who's there. Like, where's my medical experts? Where are my engineers? You could just look around the room and see who's who.
Where's my
With a
cannon
color.
fodder?
I know. And as weird as that is, if you look at the deck of aircraft carriers, they actually do that where your specialty is color coded. You can look around and see who's where they're supposed to be, all that stuff, which, yeah. So yeah. Speaking of uniforms. So I don't really, yeah, go ahead.
What's the cannon fodder color in the U.S. Navy?
Weirdly enough,
like, what is their red shirt equivalent?
So, BJ,
Barely.
That's
canvas jeans and a t-shirt is actually what a lot of regular crewmen, at least at one point, used to wear, right? So that would probably be like canvas jeans and a white t-shirt would probably be your cannon fodder.
But we're talking about like flight deck technicians. They wear different colors, my understanding, because just from pictures I've seen. Anyway, which is a good idea. But anyway, any other nitpicks? Because that one I'm not buying as much, but I will let you have your free will and.
Well, no, it seems like they have. I look back again, and you're right. They didn't really change things for most of the series, apart from the first movie, which was admittedly weird, but you think is like the best movie ever, apart from this one. So,
right. Okay,
but it just trying to think of anything else, and maybe I'm just grasping at straws here.
Okay, well, let me introduce one real quick. Another actual nitpick that makes me laugh every time when I watch this is the scene where they leave the space dock, and Spock has this moment where he sees his junior officer and is like, well, she needs an opportunity, and so he gives her this opportunity to command the ship as they leave the space dock, and it's supposed to be a growing moment. And this is a typical scene, I think, in a lot of situations where you give a junior person major responsibility, something they weren't planning on having. But you do it as a growth moment to build confidence in them, to prove that they can be stretched beyond their abilities. And it's a great scene, and I love that they put it in. And that I love how they show Kirk and McCoy just nervous in the back, being polite and quiet, yet they're both nervous about what's happening. But what makes me laugh is that when she sits down and proceeds to go through, like, the procedures for leaving the space dock are like two things. Like, okay, 1/4 impulse, engage, and then they leave. Like, they make it up to be like this big event, but really the person at the helm is probably doing all of the major selections, like all the major commands, and all she does is decide whether they're going like 0.5, like 1/4 impulse, which might be a very standard speed for leaving the space dock. But I don't know. I think it's a beautiful scene and I love it, but at the same time it makes me giggle that they gave her such a simple responsibility to do.
And yet made it out to be a huge thing.
Yes. And I could understand like a captain of a ship and they're in a harbor and there's obstacles everywhere and they give the command, hey, junior officer, you tell everyone what to do to get the boat out into the ocean. Like I could
But
understand that situation because there's a lot of
it's
middle decisions that have to be made. But yeah, go ahead.
but it's space dock, and all you have to do is drive forward and not hit the walls, right?
Right. Which is what Sulo's doing. But assuming the
Yeah.
they don't really go in Star Trek about like how much the computer is doing and how much the people are controlling, because there's probably a lot of automation. And so when they say leave space dock, it could be like just 1/4 impulse, go that way, and then the computer does all the navigation. But
I mean,
anyway, I think
in
that's my only... Go ahead.
in OG Star Trek, I mean, I guess you would know better than I would because I have not seen a lot of OG Star Trek, but I don't think the computer was quite as big a thing as compared to, say, Next Generation.
Yeah, so the computer in the original, it spoke. You could talk to it and it would respond with answers. But for
Okay.
whatever reason, they don't show it very often. And when they do speak to the computer, it's usually in a conference room. And there's a computer in the center of the conference room, and it tells them, they ask it questions, and it will respond with a dialogue of information.
So it's like
And
Mother from Alien.
kind of like
Yeah.
Mother from Alien, where you have to go to a certain spot to use it. But it's like, it was really an evolving concept for the writers, because envisioning computers was tricky, especially in the 1960s. So they talk about record tapes in the original series, which makes me giggle. But I can really appreciate that because, I mean, the fact that the writers they were trying to take the technology they knew and apply it to a future world they were imagining. I have respect for that, but it does make me giggle a little bit.
And something that I definitely appreciated was the vision that they had in certain things, right? So at one point, I'm watching them talk on a communicator, and obviously the comparisons between the basic communicator and our modern, our modern telephones is very apt. But something else that struck me was Uhura at one point was talking on her device, and she had this little silver doodad in her ear. And I'm like, huh, yeah, she's got Bluetooth now.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's like they hadn't even had that as a concept, right? The only idea that they had for headphones were these big old clunky things that would, big old earmuff things, right? And she's got this, and isn't that like the same kind of thing that she would have in the original Star Trek, like the original series?
yes, she
that-
always had that in her
That
ear. Yep.
weird little dongle thing. And it's just like, now you have to you have to think, well, maybe people who were wanting to build Bluetooth just watched Star Trek as a kid and were like, I want to make that. And they did.
Yep.
And so that's why it looks like it. When the technological ability became available for them to do it, they made it, and that's why it looks the way it does now. It's kind of impressive. Just kind of like this outlandish thing. And didn't you? I think you were the one who told me a long time ago about some of the stuff that they have was actually mock-ups for dinnerware or something like that. Some of their weird science doodads that they had were like
I don't recall that.
salt and
but
pepper
it wouldn't
shakers or something
surprise
like
me.
that. Like
I don't know.
like their original tricorder or something like that was like, okay, this is they originally thought that it was going to be like a salt and pepper shaker, and then they came along and said, no, okay, thank you, we're going to use this now as a science device, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, a
something
lot
like
of
that.
shows are like that. It's amazing how you just get a pile of junk and then you glue it all together and paint it. How you could make something look like technology.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a good, and I appreciate the movie, and it's a good movie, and it's got solid thinking in it too. where you've got two people that are pitted against each other. One's a person who, what is it? Superior intellect is the thing he keeps going on and on about.
He is genetically engineered.
And he is genuinely way smarter than they are, right? And Kirk has to admit that multiple times, that the only reason why he beats Khan is because he knows things that Khan doesn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he basically, he's incredibly intelligent, but he's waking up into a universe that is very different, and there's things he doesn't understand. So his lack of experience, and Spock points it out too, his way of thinking is very two-dimensional, which means he's not thinking of other options because he's so limited. And if the original episode is called Space Seed from the first season, the original series, in that episode, Khan wakes up. They wake him up and save his life. Kirk has to rush and break open the glass just to save him. And then they bring him back to health, and they don't know who he is, and then they find out he's this madman from the 20th century who's this tyrannical leader that escaped the judicial system in deep space.
Escaped the judicial system in 1996.
Yes, in 1996. And but he basically all he has is like he gets a chance to study the Enterprise technical manuals for a couple hours, but beyond that he has no knowledge of the 23rd century that he's now in.
Doesn't he like almost take the Enterprise in that episode or something like that?
Yes, he manages to beguile one of the crew members of the Enterprise, who is a girl, a scientist, a historian of the 20th century. So she's devoted her whole life to learning about this century, and she meets him, and she's very enamored by him, and he just, in the episode, he just knows how to say the right things. And he just completely makes her fall in love with him madly, to the point where she then portrays, there's a spoiler here, but to where she betrays the crew and helps him take over the ship. But then in the end, when she's confronted by him torturing the crew and ready to kill them unless they do what he says, she then switches back and saves Captain Kirk and causes Khan to then there's this huge fight scene where Kirk fights Khan in the engine room to gain control of the ship again. And of course, Khan is way stronger. So it's a good Captain Kirk punching fight scene that's very cowboyish. But he manages to beat Khan with a rod. Like he grabs this tool and he just like beats him with it. Anyway, because even though he's much stronger, I mean, you can still beat him down with a big metal pipe. So anyway, so we get, so yeah, so there's more, but he doesn't, my whole point of that tangent is that he really, even in this movie, he really doesn't know much about the universe. He really doesn't. He lacks knowledge quite a bit.
So we get, but give him time and he'll give him time and resources, and he'll pretty much conquer everything if he wanted to. But he's still,
he could have.
And he's still emotional, right? And that's the thing that they managed to beat him with is his unwillingness to give up on revenge against Kirk or anything like that, right? So
and this goes into who Khan is. And BJ mentioned it earlier. He's genetically engineered. And they mentioned this in that first episode from the original series. But Khan, he's part of a whole group of people who are genetically engineered. And when they genetically engineered them, they grabbed the most accomplished people in human society. People that had risen to high ranks of society. People that were also great athletes, great scientists. So they got all these DNA, like the best DNA that humans at the time thought was great DNA, and they put that all together, and what they realized is even though they were creating humans that were stronger, had better immune systems, they were more intelligent, they could also be more sociable, they were just incredible at everything they did. But the problem was is they created that a lot of those people who were people who would go the extra mile in order to accomplish a goal, when they put all that together, they realized that they had also created people with enormous hubris, people who had very strong egos, that were people that didn't have a sense of, I've gone too far now. Their ambition was also in their DNA, as they had mutated these people to be great. And because their abilities were so great, they didn't have the same life lessons of, you lost, therefore have some humility now. Like, they believed themselves to be superior than the rest of humanity. And so they believed it was their right to rule over them, and they thought of other humans as a lower life form to them. And Khan sees everyone else like this. So he sees himself as the destined ruler of all of humanity, and now perhaps even as the universe itself.
There is that philosophical question, right? Not whether or not, because aren't Vulcans kind of similar in a way then also? Aren't Vulcans like smarter, stronger, better than humans in just about every way?
Yes. And here's the trick. I think that's a really good point. You can stop me if I'm talking over you, but
no.
But the difference is with the genetic manipulation versus the Vulcans is that the Vulcans evolved on their planet, which means that if any Vulcan just was going too far or too extreme or too arrogant or too self-righteous or something like that, their DNA could naturally still evolve, which means that the Vulcans, they were able to evolve in a way that their society could function. The problem with the genetic engineered people is they were not really meant to be within human society. This was not natural evolution. So I think this is what one of the many themes of this film is. You have unnatural evolution versus natural evolution. And scientists thought that if they just genetically engineered superhumans, that they would create awesome people that would be great at everything and it would be all right. But there might be things that they don't understand, and that's where natural evolution has superiority, because through any time something just doesn't work, then eventually tragedy happens, and then the evolution can correct itself over time. So even though the rest of the humans are less intelligent, they have other attributes that help balance everything out. And what you have is a society that can coexist much better. Whereas when these superhumans, these genetically modified superhumans were created, they basically became dictators, and they started a giant world war, and people were imprisoned. They were under these dictatorships, and then they suffered terrible wars, and the whole thing was just catastrophe. And so they finally tried to destroy them, and then some of them got away, and that's where Khan's group is. Go ahead.
So that this seems like, I would say it's kind of a wasted opportunity to explore a particular question, right? So,
okay.
And BJ might want to. BJ sometimes stops me before I go down too far down rabbit holes like this, but you have, so obviously when there's in our own history, right? We've had people who think themselves superior, but they're not, because they're just humans. Everybody who is living right now has more or less, I'm not going to get into the particulars because there's, everybody's different, but for sake of sanity, I'm just going to say that everybody has more or less the same basic capabilities when coming into this life. Not necessarily the same opportunities, but the same capabilities, right? What I would pin down to say is no one in this world right now is particularly genetically superior over.
We're all created equal.
Yeah, we're all more the same,
as the Declaration of Independence says.
So,
yeah.
But what if there is a group of people that is not created equal, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm not saying that obviously in the Star Trek universe, that genie, they tried really, obviously the genie came out of the bottle, and then you're saying that they had a whole bunch of wars of where people were attempting to shove that genie back into the bottle, right? Where
exactly.
You had a genetically superior race of people wanting to, basically be the superior race, right?
Yep. And genetic manipulation is a taboo in every Star Trek movie episode from here on out. In Deep Space Nine, they have a character all about that. But go ahead.
So you have but they kind of like sidestep this particular one, because at the same time, every time you run into a group that's kind of could possibly have that superiority, they kind of put them back into the box, and they never really explore this particular concept, right? So where there's so Khan's people attempted to take over, but they attempted to take over and rule in a non-benevolent way. Obviously, they're just trying to conquer and rule and be the superior race or whatever.
Yeah.
But what if, and maybe this actually is happening with the Vulcans, what if there was a group that was attempting to take over and rule in a benevolent manner, right? And maybe I'm just like reading into it. Maybe there's like some sort of, do people ever explore that? Is there like some sort of secret Vulcan Illuminati actually in charge of the Federation? And they're the reason why the Federation is the way it is, because of their influence upon the human race?
Yes, actually, to some extent. So here's the thing. Khan's people, there's a lot of unknowns still that have left to be explored. But the idea that if you create a super race, that race will take care of you and lead you and help you and invent things and do all that stuff. According to the writing, that turned out to be a farce, because here's the thing. The whole moral stance of that is, don't believe that you understand genetics well enough to make big decisions like that. I think that's what the writers are trying to say. So whereas they believed they knew what the good genes were, and those scientists who created Khan also believed they knew what the bad genes were. They took all this DNA and they're like, well, this is the good DNA, this is the bad DNA. And they created people based on their interpretation of what that was. And the consequences were bad, because it turns out what is or is not good DNA is a huge, complicated subject. And perhaps it's best to leave it to the natural world to determine what is good DNA and what isn't. So that's the moral, is that, go ahead.
But the question then, my other question still remains is, do the writers ever explore, is there a secret Vulcan Illuminati that's actually in control of the Federation to try to guide humanity in a better way? Because they like I said, like you stated, they're genetically superior to humans in just about every way, most importantly in intellect. So
the Vulcans are smarter, but okay, let me directly answer your question. So there's no secret Vulcan society that is ever shown.
How
The
How much
Vulcans,
of a presence in Star Trek leadership are the Vulcans? Are they like equal partners with the humans? Are they like
they're equal members in the Federation, and
yeah.
all of the different alien races that are in the Federation, they all have equal part in the leadership, and there's a council where they're all represented in that council. They show that in the next movie, in Star Trek 3. They show the Federation Council. The Vulcans are a huge influence. So when a race becomes a member of the Federation, whatever is unique and special about them gets shared around. So when the Vulcans join the Federation, the Vulcan logic, the Vulcan wisdom, the Vulcan ideas, they're not pressed upon other members, but their ideas then spread throughout other cultures. So human culture was incredibly influenced by Vulcan culture. But the funny thing is that, and they show this in Enterprise too, which is the series in the early 2000s. They go a lot about the Vulcans influencing the humans. But the Vulcans do influence human culture, and human culture changes just from all of that wisdom that pours out from the Vulcans.
So
but
there is a Vulcan Illuminati, and they are manipulating humanity. Gotcha, Jeff.
It's a little paranoid. I mean, if we watch anime,
they're just not secret about their society. They just have a Vulcan society that is influencing mankind. It's not secret.
Sure.
They just have a Vulcan society that they're trying to present as a superior society. Except they don't hold their noses in the air. They don't hold their noses in there and they say that they're all superior. They just attempt to show that they are the morally superior people. Now, humans don't accept it wholeheartedly because, they like their Romulan ale and they like their rock music and they like their, other stuff. They like to have things a little messy, but they'll take a few of the things that the Vulcans have to offer.
humans and Vulcans, they are so different that they often clash when they're together. But in reality, these two different worlds are very close alliances with each other. They are the two founding members of the Federation, and they have a very strong bond with each other, even though there's often cultural conflict. It's a strange relationship.
And it's strange that it's to the point where there's even ability to crossbreed, even though they're two completely different species. So
yes, which I could tangent about that, but that might be a little bit weird. But even though they're together, and this is one of the themes that Star Trek talks about that I think a lot of people miss. The idea that you're in a different culture, you see your culture as superior to others. And yes, maybe there's good and bad, but the point is just get along. And on the Enterprise, Spock disagrees with McCoy, two different cultures clashing, but in the end, they're still on a planet trying to survive and they help each other. And they don't hold back their debates. If there's something they disagree about, they don't hide that fact. They talk it out. They tell each other exactly how they feel. And I think this is how the Vulcans and the humans get along, is that they have an incredible partnership that makes them butt heads when they're together. It's a very unique thing. And even though they butt heads, they still have enormous respect for each other. And Vulcans, they think humans smell bad. That actually comes out in Enterprise. They tolerate it. They think humans are incredibly, they're like cavemen. It's like walking around with cavemen to them. These are just primitive, emotionally driven people. But they don't like how aggressive humans can be. But at the same time, Vulcans, they have such a huge sense of logic, and they realize, and this is something that Spock says, that, I wish I could quote it. This is such a good line, but I don't think my brain can recall it correctly. There's a line that Spock often says like everything, oh my goodness, I think it's in this No, everything that is created is different, and oh gosh, I'm burning now. I'm bombing. Okay, it's a quote that says everything is different, yet it's different in its own way. And he mentions that when Kirk says, like, how's the crew going to respond? And he says, well, each according to its gifts. So the point is everything's different, and that's a good thing. Things don't have to all be the same. And just because what the Vulcans understand is even though the humans aren't like us, there can be things about humans that can be unique. And there's times where the humans surprise the Vulcans. Like these barbaric, foolish people somehow come up with this great innovative thing, this new idea, and once in a while they surprise us. The Federation was a human idea that they proposed to the Vulcans. And the Vulcans were like, are you sure we're going to have a big, huge, happy family of many worlds and we're all going to get along and share resources? And the humans were like, yes, we're going to, instead of fighting each other, we're going to work together and share. And by sharing, we'll form bonds instead of dividing us through conflict. Anyway.
So what you're saying is the Vulcans were, they're on their intellectual high horse, but they're not so far stuffed in their ivory tower that they can't recognize the usefulness of being with other of allying with other races.
No, the Vulcans believe strongly in diversity, but at the same time, they know who they are and they believe strongly in their logic. But they understand that other people are different, other civilizations are different, and that differences can bring about unique things. And being unique is a special thing because all that variety can produce things that are unexpected.
Okay.
Because if you have all the group of people that are the same, then there's a tendency to always solve problems the same way and always do things the same way. If you have a variety of philosophies and different civilizations, then now you've got a diversity of thought that can produce a greater amount of different ideas. So, yeah, the Vulcans, the thing is the humans often see Vulcans as these snobby intellectuals who are all about logic, but Vulcans are not unloving. It's just that they show love through logic, in that the rational side of things is how they find fulfillment and how they think. Like there's an episode in the original series where Spock is in command of a shuttle. The shuttle crashes on a planet, and now to leave the planet, they have to abandon two people because they don't have enough lift power for the amount of weight of all the passengers. So if they leave two passengers behind, they can escape the planet's gravity. So Spock is like, well, this is a logical decision. I'll just decide who stays and then we'll leave. This is logical. And the humans are like, this is a terrible idea. They're thinking emotionally, like, how can we abandon two people? And who is going to be abandoned? And they want to draw lots. Spock is like, no, we do the logical thing. See, they're not being, to the humans, Vulcans are unkind and dispassionate. But the Vulcans, their logic is how they find, is how they really provide their own intelligence upon things. Because by leaving two people, you then save the others. And to them, it's just simple logic that gets the job done.
You couldn't.
It's a different way of thinking.
I imagine certain elements of the shuttle would have weighed more, and you could have probably just dumped some of that and gotten back to the ship. But
well, they talk about that. It is covered by the writers, so they go through a whole thing about that. But yeah, the point is yeah.
So we've gone on about this for a long time, and BJ hasn't spoken in, frankly, forever. I'm wondering if he's still even there.
It's going to be interesting for me to come back and listen to this conversation because I think I zoned out for the last half hour or so. I zoned back in for a few minutes when Gary said Vulcan Illuminati, and that was about everything I caught from that conversation.
It was frankly very interesting.
Like I said,
me and Jeff could go on and on
the plus
about
side.
me trying
also,
to. Oh yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I could go on and on about trying to poke holes. Ultimately, it's me just trying to poke holes in the Star Trek universe, and Jeff attempting to defend it. But
Deflectors up.
Yeah. But you were saying something, BJ?
Oh, I was just going to say that on the plus side, it's going to make it easier for me to edit the audio since for about 3/4 of the podcast, there's only going to be 2 audio tracks to edit.
So BJ, yes.
Yes.
What do you think of this? Yes. Tell us what you think of it, of the movie. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, define it as in like the movie or like what you guys talked about for the last half hour that I didn't pay attention to.
Yeah, talk about the movie because rehashing what we talked about is probably not good.
In the beginning. No. I mean...
So what do you think of The Wrath of Khan?
Gee, it's almost as if we did a review where I gave it a score.
Okay. What, is there anything that you didn't like about it? Because remember, it hit a 4.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just... I can't think of anything too wrong about it. It's just not the style of movie that I'm like, oh yeah, as if we were to say Princess Bride, the only other movie that has received a 5 from a member of the I want to say constabulary, but that is not the right word.
Constituency?
Constituent, the cast, I don't know, but whatever you call us. I mean, so far the only person not to give a movie a 5 is Gary. That's because he weaseled out of giving The Princess Bride a 5 by giving it a 4.5, but that's neither here nor there. It's a great movie, I think, but it's not like the kind of movie that as I'm browsing through my DVD collection on like on any given day, but like, oh yeah, Wrath of Khan, as compared to like Princess Bride. It's like pretty much any day of the week, the Princess Bride can be like, yeah, let's watch the Princess Bride. But
does the show give you a fear of a tiny creature crawling into your ear?
So, funnily enough, growing up, my older brother used to tell me and at least one of my other siblings that the bugs that Khan put in Chekhov's and the other captain's ears were earwigs. And to this day, I don't like earwigs.
I don't think anybody likes earwigs, BJ.
I was going to say, in my defense, earwigs are incredibly creepy looking, despite the fact they are mostly harmless. But yes,
mostly harmless, BJ? No, BJ. Earwigs should be burned with fire. It doesn't matter. They should just be burned. There's too many legs and there's claws, just like these creatures. You see them, even if they're not, doing you any harm, phasers to disintegrate. That's a question, Jeff. How strong are phasers supposed to be? Last I understood, they weren't supposed to be like full-on disintegration of a person.
They can be. They have different settings, so you can turn a phaser up and cause some serious damage, or you can turn it down low, or to even turn it on stun. So
is it to the point where it could full-on wipe a person from the face of existence?
Oh
like
yeah,
it did to that one guy.
Yes, if you turn it, you can turn it up to a high setting, and it will actually vaporize whatever it hits in terms of organic matter and clothing and stuff. It'll vaporize all that.
And I do find that odd where it would, and maybe this is just a nitpick as well, where it would vaporize him but not anything around him.
Yeah, so they don't go through a lot of the physics of it, but
specifically him.
Yes, yeah. It basically all of the atoms within his body and the clothing connected to him, but certain surfaces do not. It won't transfer into a hard surface like stone or metal.
So and then it differentiates between the clothes that are touching. It'll do him, but not the clothes that are it'll do him and the clothes that are touching him, but not the floor that the clothes are touching.
Yeah. like certain surfaces.
I'm
They don't
raising,
go.
I'm doing a very Spock raising eyebrow right
I
now.
know. You're like, come on, Star Trek, give us more science.
They could
Yeah,
have
so
just
they,
had like, this big charred spot on the guy's body and said he's dead, Jim, and done that. But no, they just had to disintegrate his body completely, which raises more questions than it does, anyways.
Gary, do we need to start poking a hole in Dune to make you stop?
Oh, you guys
Two
poked
can play at
all
this game.
kinds of you guys poked all kinds of holes in Dune. This is my turn. And you
Okay,
guys
they
poked,
don't-
and you guys poked holes in Eight-Legged Freaks. So yet again, this is my turn. But
It's revenge he's after.
so I guess
Once again,
then
from Hell's Heart, he stabs at the...
so isn't the central theme of the movie is Kobayashi Maru, isn't it?
So there's so many different themes. You've got the theme of creation versus destruction with the Genesis project. You've got the Kobayashi Maru, the unwinning scenario. What do you do in a scenario where there's no way to win? You also have revenge of Khan, and we already went way too in depth about the background of him. But you have all these themes wrapped together, but I actually think the underlying theme of all of those cerebral, interesting themes is the fact that Kirk feels old. That's really the crux of it all. He feels old at the beginning of the movie. He has the career he wants as an admiral. He's just not happy. And at the end of the movie, you show him talking about how Spock was. He quotes things from Spock, and the people ask him, like, how do you feel? And he says he feels young. And what the theme of that is that youth is about personal growth and exploring, even when you're older, because he has his 40th birthday and now he feels old. But when
I think it might be a bit more than 40, Jeff.
No, I thought it was 40 in the movie.
I don't think they actually say.
They don't say, but he definitely doesn't look 40, Jeff. He looks 60.
No,
He has a
60.
He has a grown son who is a scientist.
Yeah.
Okay. The point is whatever. The
Just
point
because
is
we
that-
think 40 is old because we are about that age.
Yeah.
Okay, the point is that youth is about what you learn and how you enrich yourself. And youth is about having that desire to learn and to go out and do things. And so he feels young because it's the experiences that he's had that have enriched his soul, and having Spock as a friend, losing him as a friend, like all of those experiences, that even though they're very bitter, there's a sweetness to them where all of those things come together, and he feels young because, Spock saved the ship. Like all of these beautiful things. There's a new planet that was created. Look at all the death and destruction. But yet, through all that, there's new life that comes. And I think the show shows you the polar opposites of death versus new life. Those two different things. And he feels young at the end because he can witness new life and new things and go on these experiences. And that's, I think, the character of Kirk through the entire movies, all 6 of the movies. His big character arc is that he discovers who he is. He's not the career person that he thought he would be. He's not going to be an admiral and be in command of everything. What he really wants to be is someone going out into the universe to discover things, learn things, save things, to be a captain. And Spock even says that in this movie. He says your true destiny was to be a captain, not to be an admiral, not to be a big guy on top of the hill, but to just be a captain going out there and going into deep space and going where no man's gone before. That is your true calling. And when he when he experiences that, that's when he feels young, when he finds that one thing. In the next few movies, he goes further into that. And then by generations, he gives advice to Picard, and he says, don't let them promote you. You know, whatever they do, they're going to try and promote you. They're going to try to put you in charge of big things. Just don't let them. Just do whatever you can to stay as captain of the Enterprise. Stay part of that ship that's going somewhere. Anyway. So yes, big themes. You've got all these other things. The Kobayashi Maru, huge discussion topic. The Genesis Project, and Khan, who comes into the midst of all these things that people are doing, and just the havoc that he creates. Kirk actually let Khan go in the original series because they capture him at the end of the episode, and they're going to send him to not a penal colony. They're going to send him to a rehabilitation colony where he will go through and they'll try and rehabilitate him as a safe person, because right now he's dangerous. It's like their equivalent of a prison. But he decides not to do that. And instead, he maroons him on City Alpha 5 with his people and the girl that fell in love with him. She stays with him too. And they're going to go down without technology, and they're going to start their own civilization. And the comment that Spock says is, he says that, I don't know what will happen to the seed that you've just planted. And it would be interesting to come back in hundreds of years and to see what will become of what this is. And Kirk agrees. So the idea, it goes back to that genetic discussion of how do you fix the problem of this artificial genetic manipulation. The answer is put them on a planet and let them evolve naturally. And perhaps through the course of natural evolution, something will get fixed and they'll go on and become whatever it is that they're going to become. Yeah, sorry, I'm doing all the talking here. I'm going to shut up. Go ahead.
I can sense Gary through the internet just chomping at the bit to take a bite out of the legal system of the Federation. But
I would want to. Gosh.
I'm going to stop him for a second because I did have a thought.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna add something to this podcast, I guess. So I did think towards because it's pretty much the end of the movie, that how they handle the death of Spock it's sort of, what's the word? It exemplifies the difference between old Trek and sort of the new Trek movies. Like in Into Darkness, where they flip the script, right? And it's Kirk that sacrifices himself to save the Enterprise instead of Spock, because they didn't want to do Wrath of Khan note for note, I guess. But in New Trek, when Kirk quote unquote dies, right? Like, isn't that when Spock is like Khan or whatever, right? And in Wrath of Khan, when Spock dies, it's
sad. It's mournful.
It's very different. Like, Kirk watches his best friend die. He just kind of says no, and then he just has 1,000-yard stare. And then they cut to the funeral scene, right? It's not this big dramatic scene, it is a very dramatic scene, but it's not a dramatic reaction. It is much more like what would actually happen, I think. And plus, well, go ahead.
No, you kind of have that nailed down pretty good in the difference. And also, there's no instantly bringing him back either, right? In the newer movies, they just instantly bring him back through whatever means. They do eventually bring Spock back, but it doesn't take like 3 movies. It's like 2 or 3 movies before Spock is
the next movie.
No, well, I know they bring him back in the next movie.
It's the end of the next movie.
But like
But it's at the very, very end.
And he's not
the next movie is in fact called The Search for Spock.
And he's like he's not fully back for a bit, right? Even though they bring him back, he's not fully back. Like his mind has gone or something.
Yeah, so his mind is gone, yet they put his katra back in. And his katra is basically his mind. His mind was transferred into McCoy. Yeah, perfect place for his mind to go, into McCoy, the guy he argued with constantly in the original series.
Maybe he figured there's lost space.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah, so... And then they, in the very end of the next movie, they put his contra back in, which is a huge, dangerous procedure that an expert telepathic Vulcan has to do. But they managed to do it successfully. And then at the end of the movie, they end with him kind of coming to his senses and remembering his friends. But it's still kind of cloudy for him. And then in the fourth movie, he remembers them, but the relationship still is a little different. It's not quite the same. Like, he doesn't call Kirk Jim. He's like, why don't you call me Jim? You used to call me Jim. Like, we used to be on a first name basis. And so after the fourth movie, they're basically, the relationship is reestablished. And Spock is 100% normal by the fifth movie, by that time.
Okay. So... it's not just like instant gratification, he's back and there's no consequences. There's real consequences to his death, even if he is going to eventually be brought back. Right? So there's kind of that difference in there.
Yeah, they really played the whole character out really well. And yes, you see that evolve over several episodes.
As opposed to films. BJ, you do have a point in the newer movies. Kirk dies, but then he's just like 5 minutes later, he's brought back to life, zero consequences, blah, blah, blah. Right? It's like, why? Can't we have like some real emotional depth to, like, it's kind of hollow? And I'm not saying new movies can't have that, because new movies can have
payoff.
That. And old movies can definitely be bad. It's just when, bad movies are bad and good movies are good.
I mean, yeah, the hero coming back to life is not a new trope. I mean, how different, I mean, maybe it's a bit late in the podcast to bring up something like this, but like, how different would entertainment be if Superman stayed dead?
I know that there's a comic book series that's trying to do that. It's fairly controversial, so I won't go into it, but there's a comic book series that's trying to do that. They're not...
But like, I'm not saying, like I'm sure that story has been told, but like, how different would like modern storytelling be if...
No, but I'm not...
because like the death of Superman was like a big deal, right? It made the news and everything, and then they brought him back. Like, how?
In like 5 seconds. It's just...
Yeah, like...
It's difficult. So I can understand from a business perspective why...
Yes, I was going to say, I know there's like economic reasons why you bring back Superman, because you sell comics.
Yes.
You make money.
It's hard to justify the permanent death of a character if you know that you can make more money off of said character, right?
Yeah, and I guess now that I think about it, on the other end, there are the people who think that unless a character dies, the story is not progressing. I sort of call that the Walking Dead slash Game of Thrones problem.
Yeah.
You have to kill the characters even when you like them.
Well,
die like
I did watch The Walking Dead for like a season and a half, and I had no interest in Game of Thrones because I read the first book, and like the only character I liked died. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I never have to deal with this universe again, because the only character I cared about is not there anymore. But like when people asked what was going on in Game of Thrones or The Walking Dead, they didn't ask what was going on in the story. They asked who died, right? So
and that
like,
makes sense. It's so people coming back, especially in a way that is cheap, kind of robs the meaning of a story. It
yes.
makes it less impactful. Whereas if a person is always dead, it kind of cheapens the value of life, and you don't really want to. You don't really feel like any of these people have any value because you know that any of them could be dead at any moment.
Yeah, like having death not be the do all end all, or have death be easily reversed, does kind of less impact on that. But on the other hand, if every major story beat is someone dying, it also kind of cheapens it, because then you train the audience to not get attached to your characters.
That's probably a good reason why shows don't do that more often. Feels like The Walking Dead just killed people all the time, except for a few key characters that survives. But
yes, yeah, but you have to realize we say that, but Game of Thrones went on for 8 seasons. Walking Dead went on for like freaking ever.
Yeah.
So,
and it was the same storyline that just looped through again and again and again.
Well, like Game of Thrones is ostensibly a fantasy retelling of the War of the Roses, I believe, and Walking Dead is Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I got to start wrapping things up. I've got some things to do. People have come home, and I need to go do the things like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I hear Gary's family in the background. That's usually the cue to wrap things up.
There's so many good things to talk about, but yeah, we could go on for hours and not even scratch the surface.
I am very interested to listen to this podcast and actually comprehend what you guys were talking about for like 40 minutes, because I
feel like we've covered. But yeah, this movie has there's so many great things to talk about. The Kobayashi Maru, the no-win scenario, Spock solving the Kobayashi Maru problem by sacrificing himself, and then Spock believes the good of the many outweigh the good of the few, and then in later movies the crew reverses that back at him, and they say, well, the good of the few outweighs the good of the many. They reverse that on him, and it's this play on logic, where they all risk their lives and they give up their careers, all to save him. Not even to save him, but to just return his Katra back to planet Vulcan. Go ahead.
You kind of missed the point of Gary saying it's time to wrap up.
Yeah, yes. So just to say, that's what I'll say. There's so much to talk about.
In conclusion, and you're about halfway through your talk.
In conclusion, yes. So.
Okay, but yeah, we can end it there. But
yes,
just so you know, we talked about the nerdiest things possible.
But there's a lot of things we missed. I apologize for forcibly derailing your train of thought, but you tend to keep going.
I know. My thoughts never end. We all know this by now.
Choo-choo.
Choo-choo.
Anyway,
in conclusion, I would like to say that this was a good movie, despite my only giving it a 3 versus Jeff's 5. Jeff?
Yep. It's a 5. It's one of my favorites. I like Search for Spock even more, but this is a time-honored classic of the Trek verse, and I think this movie saved Star Trek, because the first
it in fact did, according to what I read.
Yeah, so when people saw this, they're like, wow, Star Trek can be cool. Yeah, it's a good emotional ride. People love the explosions, the space battles, and they love Kirk screaming. Yeah, go ahead.
I just remembered something I was going to say like an hour ago.
Okay, tell us, and then we'll cut out.
And then we'll end. So like way back beginning of the podcast, Jed says something like, There's a part in the movie where they like fly to space dock and I laughed, and for the life of me, I thought Jeff was going to say something about how they didn't spend 10 minutes rotating around the Enterprise like they did in the motion picture. There you go, folks. We end the Rathacon episode with me making fun of the Star Trek motion picture and its establishing shots yet again.
Yep. You'll never let that go, BJ. It'll just be a revenge.
45 seconds, Jeff. 45 seconds to zoom in on a space station where they spend a 30-second scene.
Yep.
I'm BJ. With me is Jeff and Gary. If Gary's still there, he might have left already because he heard Jeff start rolling again. See you guys next time for something or other, I'm sure. I'm going to ask for final thoughts. We're just going to end. Bye.